Hello, everybody, and welcome back to Edusations. Very excited today to have somebody who is very accomplished in a lot of different ways today, and you're going to see a lot of the reasons why. I have Raymond from Rhode Island. Raymond, you want to go ahead and introduce yourself to the viewers?
Yeah, my name's Ray Steinmetz, or Raymond, I guess doesn't really matter, but I'm a K-8 math instructional coach here in Rhode Island. So I taught middle school math for about a decade before taking on this role this year. Some of the things, I guess, in the online world that I've accomplished recently, I'm the co-host of the Instant Relevance podcast with my friend Dennis Sharon. We actually have season 2 coming out starting on, I don't know when this is coming out, but it's coming out on February 2nd. So hopefully we'll be kind of running through some of the great interviews we have for season 2. I also run a website called blendedlearningmath.com, and I've been writing for a couple different websites over the last year, and I actually just kind of put those together in a collection all in one place in an ebook called Getting Started with Blended Learning. It's hopefully the first in a series of blended learning math books that, or at least ebooks that will be available to kind of push the cause of blended and personalized learning in the math classroom.
Yeah, that's awesome. So you just mentioned the ebook, which is phenomenal. I was really, and I told you before the recording, really excited to be able to share it with my math teachers at my school. Before we dive into the book itself, I'm just curious, how would you personally define blended learning? Like, what does your blended learning approach look like in the classroom?
Yeah, so I actually I heard a really good way of describing this, so I'm not going to take credit for it. I think I probably saw it on Twitter somewhere. But,
Where we find all the good things.
Yeah. So the goal is personalized learning, right? So we want to be able to provide, a differentiated pace as long as some voice and choice. You can't have total voice and choice in everything you learn. You have standards and everything, but at least a certain amount of voice and choice for our students as well. And the mode of doing that is blended learning. So by taking some of your kind of paper and pencil tasks and also melding those in kind of a structure of your classroom so that you can do both online and offline learning. The idea is to free up the teacher. So really changing from a teacher-centered classroom into a student-centered classroom. So just to give you an idea, I don't have a lot of examples from this year because I'm no longer in the classroom, but last year for several months straight, I didn't teach math in front of the class at all. So
Wow.
I did it all through kind of self-paced playlists, blended learning tools like GoFormative, and then also some self-made video as well, with the goal of, taking myself as the gatekeeper of information away from the front of the room so that students can access and be successful at their own pace without waiting on me, but also being able to identify those students who need help more. So I'm focusing more of my time on those kids that really need it.
Yeah, and I like what you talked about blended learning. I think there's this big trend there was this big trend in education for a while where it was like, you have to be tech heavy, only use technology. And there was this big push for paperless classrooms. Even today, there's still a huge push for it. Why do you think blended learning has more of an advantage than just like a paperless classroom where they're just spending all day in front of a computer? And that probably came across more weighted than I intended it for.
Yeah, no, that's fine. I was a computer engineer before I was a teacher, so I'm pretty adept with technology. Yet over the last decade of being a teacher, I've really struggled with how to fit it into my classroom, to be honest. Before I got some really great blended learning coaching that really said, okay, here's a structure of an everyday lesson that you can do, and this is what it would actually look like in your classroom. Before I saw that from other people online, some mentors of mine online with some of the playlists I was doing, and then also before I got some really great coaching, I really didn't know where technology fit in my classroom. So, I'd bring in the laptop cart, for, some online homework or something one day. Or
Very innovative, right?
Yeah, bring in the laptop cart to do like some internet research.
Yeah. I've done that too.
Yeah. I mean, it's really innovative, But I was very lucky last year to be a part of a one-to-one initiative, and it really just blew everything out of the ballpark. Like actually having kids just have that computer readily accessible every single moment of the day. And really, them being adept in using technology as a learning tool, and building that within them was also part of the process as well. So, once we actually had, that in place, the one-to-one initiative, and kind of got a lot of the kinks out of the way, I was really able to run with it and take some things I had kind of found once again through mentors of mine and from my coaching, and really put it in place. And the results were fantastic. I had taught the same lesson probably 10 years in a row, and doing it in this blended way, I reached students, and the results were fantastic.
That's awesome.
I remember I had a test I'd given, past couple years in a row that students had to retake. And, I gave it last year after blending my classroom, and I think the average was like a 94% or something.
That's awesome.
And not only was by taking myself out of the front of the classroom, I really realized how much I was boring students, those students who could really succeed without me if I just gave them the tools to succeed.
Mm-hmm.
And they were able to go to different places than they'd ever been able to go in my class. Different extensions, just say, hey, go on homedepot.com and cost out a ramp and build an actual ramp, not just one on paper for surface area or whatever.
That's awesome.
But also I was getting so much good formative assessment data that I was able to identify those particular students that I needed to spend more time with, which is that type of data I wasn't getting when standing in front of the room. The only data you really get by standing in front of the room and teaching, in front of the whole class is those few students that raise their hand. Right. So it's a lot of guesswork, and, blended learning and some of the tools out there really take that guesswork away. So you can really focus on those students and really just be more efficient in your educating.
Yeah. And so, in that whole process too, you've spoken about how you've been able to support students growing. What do you think is the, I hate to use the word magic here because it's really a science and an art here, but what is the magic behind this blended learning approach then that makes it so successful? We went one-to-one this school year, and so it's been really exciting to be able to build opportunities for my students to be able to incorporate different self-guided learning throughout the whole block, and then with some students being able to take some learning home and coming back in and flipping a class here and there too. What do you think about that blended learning approach makes it so unique compared to the way that you and I were probably taught, where we sat in rows, took notes, and took a test on Friday?
Yeah, I think that now, especially in math, there's a real focus on being able to understand math, but not necessarily have to show in a particular way. I think that, I have really just realized recently that I am very terrible at mental math. Like I said, I was a computer engineer. I am a math teacher, now I'm a math coach. But when I do math, it's like this slate in my head that I'm writing numbers on, because I went to 12 years of Catholic school where I learned how to do math just a certain way. So not only is blended learning kind of allowing for that differentiation of pace and voice and choice, when you give a student something like a playlist and let them work through it at their own pace. But also, you really need to embrace the fact that everybody learns differently. I think the magic really comes from some of the research that's out there, a lot of neuroscience out there that shows that every single student learns differently. I saw a great keynote speech by Todd Rose. He's a Harvard professor. I think he runs a company named Populous now, but his keynote speech was awesome. He just talked about back in the day, the Air Force had a really hard time because they thought that they could recruit only pilots that were a certain size so that they fit in the airplanes, right? Well, it ends up that every single person has a different body shape and a body type. It just doesn't happen. But this was back in the 50s, and what came of that was adjustable seats, right? Now, every one of us gets in a car and we all have different body sizes, and we can operate an automobile just fine. Well, the same thing is about our learning environment, right? So the whole idea of everybody sitting in rows, well, that learning environment doesn't fit everybody. It might have been good for me, back in the 1990s, because I was compliant and I did what I was told, and I
Yeah.
learned that way, you know, and I knew what to do to be successful. Well, I think that Dennis Sharon likes to say this a lot, is, you know, we have a really high, high expectations of compliance a lot in school and not a high expectation of learning. And I think really embracing the fact that everybody learns differently, and if you have that high expectation for learning and not just that students are compliant in your class, I think that that's where understanding that really will allow you to say, okay, now how do I use technology to help me do that? Because without that core understanding, or at least like acceptance that everybody learns differently, you know, you're really just kind of getting stuck in the old ways of teaching in front of the room. And
Yeah, you know, you're being caught up in a practice that my principal Evan Robb likes to point out a lot. It's a practice that was really good for producing industrial laborers to work in an assembly line, but you know that's not what our students are going to be doing in the future. Most likely, they're going to be designing next steps, future places to go, travel, the next great advancement in medicine, and you know those things were invented in the past too. But so much more was put on the emphasis of, you know, be a good, strong worker in this factory. And you know that's a good, noble, honest living. And what we're finding now is that while it's still a good living, there are a lot of other opportunities being opened out there as automation is starting to take over those positions over the next few years. So it's important for them to be able to think about, whenever I look at this math equation, or whenever I look at any sort of content, I want to be able to know how to do more than just the one way that it's being put on this worksheet, or than the way that I'm seeing it, you know, being put on this computer screen instead. I want to understand the thinking processes behind it as well. You agree with that?
yeah, and you know, we really need to start thinking of education as really growing brains as well.
Absolutely.
You know, and if we're not making those connections or allowing students to make those connections in our class, that part of their brain isn't growing. And they'll have to rely on something else in their life to teach them those lessons, or something else in their life to give them the ability to think outside the box. And my question is if that's not what school is, then, I mean, where is it going to happen? So, and I think that, we've kind of beat our head up against the wall for a very long time, asking ourselves, how do we reach those students that are traditionally hardest to reach? And I found in my classroom that the answer is giving them voice and choice and letting them work at their own pace. I've seen time after time again, students coming into my class who are like terrified of math. Like, at the beginning of the year, they're like, scared cats when it comes to math. They just, everything about it just repulses them. And, you give them the room to grow and do things the way that they find themselves successful. And all of a sudden you notice that they have these successes, and then they're growing. And next thing you know, they aren't as, anxious about taking a math test, or, they're not as anxious about even just opening the book sometimes, because, math anxiety, it's crazy. Like the first couple of days of my math class were always, it's like, what did someone do to you? It's just, it's almost like, trauma when it comes to math. And
you're right. It's a very real fear that we see with students that I think has been kind of pushed off as, oh, they'll get the hang of it. But, it's deeper rooted than just like oh, I don't like math. That's not for me.
Yeah. And if we're not actively doing something about that as math teachers, then we're not doing our job. Because, there's a lot of great things that math can do. And actually, the research has shown that the correlation between math achievement and achievement in the rest of your life is actually the highest out of any other subject. Cool. So, I mean, I see, whenever I see someone on Twitter say, like, oh, literacy is like the gatekeeper of this or that and the other, I want to just fire back and say, like, no, but math is so much more important.
Math literacy is important, right?
So, and that's something that I'm working with in my district is, how do we put more of a priority on math? Because I feel like, literacy is kind of taken over, and, you got your ELA and you got your writing. And I don't want to say that those things aren't important, but the research shows that the correlation between math and success is there. And if you want a place to kind of focus to reach people who are not traditionally reached, then math is a place to be. And I think a lot of people are just really afraid of math because it's not easy to teach, and it hasn't had a lot of success in the past. And it seems like there's a lot of kind of back and forth about the way it should be taught. But the research really shows that pretty definitively of how people learn math and how to do it best. And if you ask me, there's really no question of the way it should be taught. And, kind of once we're all on board with that, I think it's going to be a lot more accessible for more people.
Cool. And so a lot of these ideas are in your ebook. If somebody is listening right now and they're thinking, wow, this is really insightful stuff, where can they find your ebook at?
Yeah, so I learned this last weekend, how to publish an ebook. So I did it. I kind of put together, like I said, a collection of all of my articles on different places. It's on Amazon.com as a Amazon won't let you sell an ebook for free, so it's 99 cents. So it's a Kindle book on Amazon for 99 cents, but if you want it for free, it's also available on my website, www.blendedlearningmath.com, as a PDF as well. So.
Nice guy, Ray, right there. So, hey, if you're a math teacher, make sure you downloaded it. Ray's an insightful guy in case you haven't already figured it out. Ray, outside of your ebook, you also have a podcast that you said you did with Dennis Sheeran. Why don't you go ahead and get into some details about how did that originate, and then what's been the big mission of it?
Yeah, so I think this summer I had messaged Dennis. I read his book, had interacted with him. He's pretty popular on Twitter. He likes all these instant relevance moments. Like today, I really enjoyed his thing. He showed this picture. It was from Canada, of this like mega pack of Budweiser. It was like this huge, I don't even know how many cans were in it, like 1,000 cans. It was like,
holy cow,
$4,700 or something like that. Like this just massive like brick of beer. And, just that one picture, there's a lot of questions, right? There's especially a lot of math questions. What's the volume? How much money did it cost to make the beer in there? How much would it take to drink all that beer? And now we're talking about beer and it shouldn't be done in school, but still, I love how he just takes something and just runs with it and says, like, for instance, the Baby Shark song, which my daughter can't stop singing. He came up with a blog post of like 50 ways to use blended or to use Baby Shark in your classroom. And
That's awesome.
Yeah. So he has like this special ability, and he's been doing it for a while, with the book and, some of his outreach and consulting of the instant relevance thing. So we talked about it, we kicked it around, and we like the idea of relevance as kind of like this blanket thing that can go beyond, I think, what he originally kind of wrote the book about. Being also where it brings me in is like, how can we use personalized and blended learning to make learning relevant as well? So if you listen to the podcast, there's a little bit of those instant relevance kind of mini moments where we say, okay, how do you bring kind of a relevant moment into your classroom and think outside of the box around that? We play back and forth with that. But also we really get deep into kind of educational discussions, especially with some of the interviews we have, not only asking others how they make education relevant in their own lives, but also really inspecting kind of a lot of different features of education, just all from the top down. Like this season, we have a former head of the Massachusetts Teachers Union coming on. We're trying to get some superintendents to come on. We've got tons of principals and authors, and we've got some other authors, even some children's authors coming on, leaders of different organizations, for young educators, for educators of color. We're really trying to interview just about everybody we can and talk about how do we make education better for students, and how do we use this idea of relevance kind of outside of the box of, just kind of Dennis's thing. How do we use personalized and blended learning to get ourselves there? And, even some of the innovative things like Genius Hour and that sort of thing as well. So we kind of felt that relevance was like a good blanket topic for us to kind of just investigate anything we wanted in education, which has been pretty cool.
Yeah, and that's on iTunes, and anywhere else I'm missing?
It's actually, we published it on Anchor, but Anchor is really cool. It kind of tosses it out everywhere. So it's
Okay.
on pretty much every platform. So Instant Relevance podcast, anywhere podcasts are found.
That's awesome. That's great. And then, again, right, I feel like you do a lot of things. One last thing I want to hit on before we get toward the end of their show is is your edChatRI, our featured chat of the day. What was the thought behind, I want to start this, and then what are some successes that you found as a result of it?
Yeah, and as you know, I've been kind of in and out on the education chat community over the last year. You host your own ed chat. I think you might know the answer to this just because you started your own ed chat as well. And I try to make as many as possible. I do it while, kind of putting my kids to bed, waiting for them to fall asleep. So
Right.
it's throughout the week, I feel like I can't always make all the different ed chats, but I try my best. But I saw that EdChat Rhode Island was really active a couple years ago and kind of had fallen to the wayside. So I got a hold of, because it had a slot at 8 o'clock on Sundays and everything, but no one was running it. So this summer, I just kind of took it over. I talked to some of the people around Rhode Island who were running it in the past, and they said, yeah, go for it. So I really focused on asking good questions. I enjoy a lot of ed chats, but I just wanted to make sure that we were asking some really deep driving questions and kind of, I feel like sometimes the answer to ed chat questions is always like, oh, you could probably answer them all with just like be positive and say hello,
Mm-hmm.
And so I wanted to ask deeper questions, and that's kind of what I've been doing since I took it over this summer. And I really like it because just like this last week, I was kind of struggling with something at work, and I was able to go to EdChat Rhode Island on Sunday, ask some questions about creating a culture of professional learning and some things that I was really wondering about. And I just had lot of really great perspectives from people all around the world. Actually, to be honest, most people who join aren't even from Rhode Island anymore. So
Yeah.
I think it's really grown into something where now I have kind of outside organizations asking to host it. We had edChatRI host recently. We had a couple conferences that are interested in hosting as well. So, hopefully it goes well from here. I just wonder how long I'm going to be able to keep it up.
Hey, you keep finding those guest hosts, and it'll magically work out.
Yeah.
Well, and hey, listen, Ray, we talked about a lot of really good stuff today. This blended learning conversation, I think it's gonna be really good for a lot of people that are thinking about, one, why should I do it, and then two, how do I do it? So thank you for that. Enjoyed talking about your podcast, and then a quick little overview of the EdChat. If somebody wants to join EdChat Rhode Island, when can they do that?
So it's at 8 p.m. Eastern time on Sunday.
Yeah, so please, again, make sure you said that. He said it earlier in the video, said it now, and I'll also make sure it's in the description of the video near the end too. Well, Raymond, about to get to the point where we're at the end of our show, which means it's time for our high fives here. This is the point where 5 totally uneducated or uneducation-related based questions just help the viewers get to know you a little bit better. Okay, you ready?
All right, I'm ready.
All right, first one, napkins, yay or nay?
I would say the sock is the best napkin I've ever had.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I've never been a huge napkin person. I not like I'm gonna like wipe it all my clothes, but it's just I don't really know how much I need it.
Yeah, a sock is always a good backup.
Yeah, I like that. I'm gonna tell my wife that. Next one, cake or pie?
Ooh, wow. I would say cake.
Yeah.
There's nothing that beats a good German chocolate cake. I like. That's what I get on my birthday every year. So
That's awesome. I took German in high school, and it was always great whenever somebody would bring in that. Didn't have as much of an appreciation for it as I do now, but even then.
I learned it's actually not German. It's just
really?
more sugar.
Okay.
Yeah, my wife made it once, and she did some investigating, and yeah, not German.
There you go. Stuff we learn on Edusations, people. This is the real stuff. Third one, beach or mountains?
Oh man. Well,
you ask these tough questions on EdChat Rhode Island, so I've got to ask some tough ones here.
I live near the ocean now, which is a big improvement in my life. Rhode Island's beautiful. So I would say nothing beats the ocean, but man, I love the mountains too. That's a tough one, but since I live in Rhode Island, I got to give props to the ocean.
Okay.
Ocean State, you know.
Next one. Do you call it soda, pop, or something else?
Coke.
Coke.
Everything's
Okay.
Coke. Yeah.
Is Coke also your favorite Coke?
Coca-Cola Classic, yes.
Yeah.
I asked for a Coca-Cola Classic because I don't want to get a Diet Coke.
Yeah. You
Yeah.
have to, right?
Yeah.
And then the last one, and I think I might know this answer based on where you're related or where you live geographically. Do you watch the Super Bowl for the game or for the commercials?
At this point, for the commercials, to be honest, I'm not from Rhode Island, so I'm not a Patriots fan. I'm actually a Colts fan. I grew up near Indianapolis, and I don't do that too much out here. They used to be pretty big rivals. But at this point, I watch it for the commercials just because the Patriots have been in the Super Bowl every year that I've lived here pretty much. And, you know, I'm forced to go to like a Patriots Super Bowl party. And, yeah, just have to keep my mouth shut and, you know, eat the food and play with the kids.
And enjoy it, right?
Yeah.
Well, hey, again, really enjoyed having you on. Before we sign off, any final words of wisdom for the viewers?
No, I know that blended learning and, you know, using technology in the classroom can seem kind of tough. But what I really tried to do with kind of my collection of articles is say, you know what, it's going to, just like every classroom you walk into looks different. You know, everybody's going to integrate technology and do personalized learning just a little bit different. Okay. But if you do some research, I don't want to, you know, make myself out to be the expert, because there's certainly great organizations out there like the Highlander Institute. And if you go to just Blended Learning Universe and kind of study the different structures of how to run a blended learning classroom and different options, because, you know, once again, not everybody has the same situation. Not everybody has a one-to-one and everything like that. So do some research, check out the book for a first-person narrative of what it's like to blend your classroom. And yeah, that's it. Check me out on Twitter at blended_math.
Yeah.
Other than that, that's it.
Awesome. Well, thank you again, Ray. Hey, if you're watching this right now, and again, if you are looking for Ray's contact information, that's going to be in the description of the video below. Hopefully you enjoyed what you saw today, so please be sure to click the subscribe button at the end. And if you or a friend are interested in signing up for Edusations, you can very easily sign up by going to philstrunk.com/contact. Thank you all so much for watching. Have a great day. Bye-bye.